Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire supported by Glenlivet Books. Today I want to explore and examine India and Pakistan's roller coaster relationship. It seems to swing from moments of hope and expectation to depths where they accuse each other of terror and acrimony. And that's exactly what's happened this year. In February, when the ceasefire was renewed, there was enormous hope and expectation. But by June and July, the two countries are accusing each other of terror. So what has gone wrong? And secondly, we in India have a clear idea of how we view the relationship, but how is it viewed from Islamabad? Those are the two key issues I should raise today with Pakistan's National Security Advisor, Moeed Yusuf. Dr. Yusuf and I want this to be a balanced, sober and objective discussion which can be appreciated by people on both sides of the border. We want to try and avoid the acrimony and the tutu meme that traditionally characterize India-Pakistan interviews. Let's hope we succeed. Keep your fingers crossed. Dr. Yusuf, let's start with the most recent moment of hope and expectation, the February 25th renewal of the 2003 ceasefire. At that time, the joint statement issued by the Director Generals of Military Operations on both sides said they would address each other's core issues and concerns. Let me start by asking you, what were the background developments which made this renewal of the ceasefire possible?
Thanks, Karan. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Hope you're doing well. Before I begin, allow me, because I haven't had an opportunity for a while, to express my heartfelt condolences and sympathies with all Indians, all people of India. We've seen harrowing images. It's been a human tragedy in terms of the COVID pandemic. So everybody who's lost loved ones, I really want to make sure I put this out from all Pakistanis. This is a human tragedy above politics, and we should keep it that way. And now we're sort of hearing that the numbers may be as high as 3-4 million, much higher than acknowledged by the Indian government. Whatever it may be, you have Pakistan's full support. As far as your question is concerned, look, you're right. I mean, I distinctly remember the last interview you did with me last year. I had alluded to contacts from India wanting to talk. Unfortunately, I was laughed at, scoffed at by many in India, saying, why would India ever want to do this under the current circumstances? I think we should give credit where it's due. It's a good thing. If a country saw the need to talk to a neighbor, saw perhaps, I hope, that there was a mistake made and things need to be rectified, it was a good thing. And thus, there was a contact made. Pakistan did reciprocate by asking a very simple question. What is it that India is willing to do to ensure that it does right by the Kashmiris to move forward? And if it is sincere, Pakistan is ready to move forward. And that's really what the contact was. Now, you talk about the DGMOs and you talk about the core concerns. I think this is important to understand. What India's core concerns are today, because India is changing very fast, you'd have to ask the Indian government. For Pakistan, there are two main concerns. Number one is Kashmir. It has always been, it will always be there till the Kashmiris get their right to self-determination as enshrined in the UN Security Council resolutions. There's going to be no change on that whatsoever. The second core concern is terrorism. And I want to make sure everybody understands terrorism is Pakistan's core concern. And Karan, I say this, and this is not about tutu meme, but this is a very important facet of Pakistan's policy towards India. We need India to understand that we know that India is perpetrating terrorism against Pakistan in Pakistan, and it is unacceptable. We can get into details when you want, but I want to lay this out very clearly because there's been a narrative out here, oh, Kashmir is Pakistan's concern and terrorism is India's. I don't know what India's core concerns are today, frankly, given the changes in India. I'm telling you that terrorism and Kashmir both are Pakistan's core concerns. We are a victim of state-sponsored terrorism. I want to be unequivocal about it.
I will come to those issues in a moment's time, but for now, let's stick to what I said was the last moment of hope and expectation and explore that a little further. There were reports that there were secret back-channel contacts and meetings between you and your Indian counterpart, Ajit Doval, between Mr. Doval and Pakistan's Army Chief General Bajwa, and indeed also between the heads of the two countries' intelligence agencies in Dubai. Can you confirm that those contacts happened? And secondly, how important were these contacts in facilitating that ceasefire?
First of all, I would use the word contacts, not back channel. Back channel is something very different. It's an authorized ability by two governments to come together, have a serious negotiation on whatever issue there is. Pakistan and India have had back channels in the past. This wasn't one. This was a contact made by the Indian side to us. And we, as I said, reciprocated by asking a simple question. How are you planning to reverse the unilateral and illegal actions of August 5th? We ultimately publicly put out what was the minimum to move forward. And that's where the conversation was.
Can I ask you this?
In terms of the LOC.
Can I ask you this? Did you meet your Indian counterpart, Ajit Doval?
I did not.
You did? Are you saying yes?
No, I did not.
So there was no meeting between you and Ajit Doval. Those reports are untrue.
Those reports are untrue.
Was there any meeting between Ajit Doval and Pakistan's Army Chief General Bajwa? Those two were said to have happened.
What I will tell you, Karan, is that intelligence level contacts happen even the worst of circumstances. They were made this time. Who was there from the Indian side? Frankly, I would protect that because that's for India to decide whether it wants to reveal or not. Because if I were to be brutally honest, it would also reveal who really calls the shots in India. So I'd let that be Delhi's decision. What I will tell you is there were intelligence level contacts made possible. That's where this exchange of views happened. Nothing more than that. No back channel, no dialogue.
Was your ISI chief the person who represented Pakistan at those intelligence level contacts?
Irrelevant. Intelligence level contacts, the conversation happened. You can ask the Indians who was there from their side. I've told you the material and the substance of that. That's where we were. And I can answer your LOC question if you allow me.
Did these contacts happen in Dubai as Bloomberg reported?
Again, I think it's completely irrelevant where they happened. We need to stick to substance. They happened where it was convenient, may have been virtual, may have been physical. I mean, this is all form. The real issue is we have a problem on our hands. Pakistan and India are neighbors. Pakistan wants to move forward with India, wants to, as my Prime Minister very recently said, live like civilized neighbors. Unfortunately, the current mindset, the RSS ideology as we see it, has come in the way.
One more question about February. First of all, I take it when you didn't answer my question, did Mr. Doval meet Mr. Bajwa? That's because either you don't want to or they didn't meet. Am I right in that understanding?
It's not for me to reveal who did what from the Indian side. As I told you, it would reveal who really caused the shots in India. Please ask your government. It'll be better that way. It'll be unfair for me to do.
But you are suggesting that there may have been a meeting between Mr. Doval and General Bajwa. You're leaving that open?
I'm not suggesting either way.
Okay. Now, there were also reports that third parties had a role to play. The United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, perhaps the American government, perhaps also the British government, and certainly the UAE ambassador in America, Yusuf Al-Otaiba, confirmed to General McMaster that his country, the UAE, had a role to play. So let me ask you, what sort of role did the UAE play and how important was it?
Karan, this whole issue of third parties, I saw it reported in the media. You know, it's not an issue for Pakistan. Pakistan's position, standard position for years and years, permanently has been any third party that wants to come in and help resolve the Kashmir issue between Pakistan and India in line with the UN resolutions is welcome. So third parties make contacts with Pakistan all the time because the world is worried. Obviously worried. There are two nuclear powers. And unfortunately, the world is also seeing where one of them is headed. And so these contacts are made all the time. Pakistan's answer is very simple. We are ready. Go and talk to the neighbor and see what they say.
So now, you are confirming, Dr. Yusuf, that the UAE did play a role, that Ambassador Al-Theba is correct when he says, and I'm quoting him, that it's important for them to have a healthy, functional relationship, which is exactly our objective. He also said this was our goal. So you're confirming the UAE played a role.
I'm not confirming anything. I haven't even completed my sentence. Allow me. The first part is absolutely correct. Everybody wants Pakistan and India to have good relations. Pakistan wants to have good relations with India. What I was telling you was that for Pakistan, it's very simple. Go to the other side and talk to them. Now, who went to India? What pressure was exerted? How did they talk, cajole, convince, pressure? It's really for the Indians to say, I don't know. We are not privy to that. All we know is there was a contact made. How much pressure was put on India? Why India, addressed whatever was told to them, whether they succumbed to the pressure, whether they did it on their own. We don't know. I mean, that's for...
Your answer, Dr. Yusuf, your answer in the way you phrased it and expressed it clearly suggests that someone did go to India, someone did put pressure.
I have a sense.
You're not revealing who did it. You're clearly...
I have a sense that there was some pressure perhaps put on India, but again, I can't confirm that because I wasn't in the room. Your government would be better in explaining why third parties were involved on the Indian side, because it's India that stubbornly refuses and rejects it, at least publicly. So in this case, it seems to be that there was, but again, I wasn't in the room.
One more question before I move ahead. When you say I have a sense some pressure was put on India, will you tell me who by? Was it the UAE? Was it Saudi Arabia?
Only New Delhi can say who came to them and asked whatever they asked. I wasn't in the room. But
Let's then move forward. I want at this point to discuss with you some very important comments made by General Bajwa, which attracted enormous attention and interest on the Indian side. First of all, on the 2nd of February at the Pakistan Air Force Academy, General Bajwa spoke about extending a hand of peace in all directions and resolving the Kashmir issue in a dignified and peaceful manner. Then on the 18th of March, at the Islamabad Security Dialogue, he said, and I'm quoting him, "We feel it is time to bury the past and move forward." These comments were interpreted in India as a sign that General Bajwa was happy and willing for the dialogue to resume and for the two countries to find a way of sorting out their differences. Was that Indian interpretation of General Bajwa's comments correct or incorrect?
I don't know how many times the Pakistani Prime Minister, Pakistani Foreign Minister, the Army Chief have constantly said Pakistan wants a civilized, good relationship with India. We want to live in peace. We want to move forward. I've explained this to you. I think I did explain this to you last time, Karan. These are not polemics. This is not politics. This is not made up. Pakistan is decidedly on a path to geo-economic success. We are moving in a direction where we want connectivity, development partnerships, and peace with the world. We want to be the melting pot for positive global economic interests. So it's only logical that we go from there to say we want to live in peace. Now,
then pause a moment. You are therefore confirming that the Indian interpretation of General Bajwa's comments was correct. That's clearly the import of your answer.
If you will continue to not allow me to complete my sentence, you will draw whatever inference you want. Just hear me out. I'm here for as long as you want. Just hear me out. I'm just telling you what Pakistan's position is if you're interested. Look, that is where Pakistan is. So yes, in principle, we want that. He even went to the extent, if I remember correctly, of saying, willing to bury the past and move forward. That's perhaps what interested India a lot. What does that mean? Unfortunately, the translation was made and there was, frankly, a very dedicated campaign that also got to the illegally occupied territory saying, oh, Pakistan has washed its hands clean of Kashmir. We're ready to move forward. It's done and dusted. Now, Karan, two important points here that I want to put on the table. Number one, I want to be clear. Pakistan wants to move forward on Kashmir. But Pakistan will not move forward at the expense of Kashmiris and Kashmiri lives. Our position remains wedded to the UNSC resolutions. The right to self-determination is granted. And if India is so confident about this, the answer is very clear. Ask the people. It's been 2 years. There was a pretense that this would be resolved, dusted, will be taken care of, Kashmir will be normalized in India. It hasn't happened. It cannot happen. The second point, no, I mean, let me just tell you why we haven't moved forward. This interpretation that I think India made, that this is an opportunity to just say everything is taken care of, we can move forward, was incorrect. Second, we in Pakistan have constantly argued that India has to do certain things in Kashmir for us to move forward.
Okay, let's take this step by step. Let's for a moment focus our attention on the things General Bajwa said. You clarify whether the Indian understanding was correct or not, and then we'll move on. If we kaleidoscope everything together, we won't make much progress. From an Indian point of view, perhaps the most important thing allegedly said by General Bajwa was on April the 23rd, in a 4-hour-long conversation with selected Pakistani journalists at an iftar gathering. And this was reported by Fahad Hussain in Dawn on the 25th of April, 2 days after it happened. According to the Dawn report, General Bajwa is reported to have said the two sides had agreed that rather than Kashmir first or terrorism first, all issues would be addressed at the same time. Secondly, the general, according to the Dawn report, is reported to have said Pakistan's primary interest is that occupied Kashmir gets back its statehood, and India agrees not to bring about any demographic changes in the disputed territory. And finally, according to the Dawn report, the general also said Article 370 is not an issue because Pakistan has never recognized this provision. And my question is simple. Was this your government's thinking in April?
My government's thinking has been very consistent, and what you've noted is all in line with that. You see, when somebody says that Pakistan and India will move in this direction or will agree to move in this direction, clearly that's based on some messaging, correct? So if Pakistan was willing to give India the benefit of the doubt, as I told you, when a contact was made, we wanted to test India's sincerity. That's what any country would do. How would you test sincerity? You would test sincerity by seeing whether India does the minimum required to at least start a conversation on how to resolve Kashmir, not dialogue, minimum required to start a conversation on how to resolve. Second, we would want to see India take some steps on the ground. I'll tell you what steps. Third, most importantly, we wouldn't expect a sincere country to go to people of Kashmir and say, there's a deal, done and dusted, Pakistan doesn't care about you guys anymore, you are going to live with us for the rest of eternity. Now, we had said very simply, and this is the second point that you've noted in General Bajwa's comments, as reported by the media, by the way. Of course, it was, not first-hand. Number one, we saw a material, unilateral, illegal change on August 5th, 2019. That has to be reversed for a start of a conversation on how to give Kashmiris their right to self-determination. What does that include? Permanent seizure of all efforts towards demographic change, giving and maintaining and retaining Kashmiris' identity. So this effort of just saying, oh, they're all Indian is the same, cannot be accepted. The fundamental rights of Kashmiris, for God's sakes, treat them like normal humans, release prisoners, etc. And including, Karan, you can't avoid the last one. You cannot expect as India to continue perpetrating terrorism in Pakistan and hope that Pakistan just closes its eyes to it because the global narrative is on your side. That doesn't work anymore. The final point you made on General Bajwa's three comments, I also want to clarify. 370 is an Indian constitutional article. Pakistan does not accept the imposition of the Indian constitution on the illegally occupied territory to begin with. So the non-issue means whether you call it 370 or 500, it's not our concern. We are talking of the spirit, the real change on the ground, which needs to be reversed.
I'm going to pick up and underline what you said, which was an elucidation of what General Bajwa said, because I think it's very important from the point of view of the Indian audience. The steps that you want India to take as a minimum to start dialogue is do not change the demography, restore the rights of the Kashmiris in terms of their democratic rights, do not play with their identity, and please don't inflict terror on us. More importantly, you made it crystal clear in your own words that Article 370 is a non-issue. You are not pressing for its restoration. You haven't, however, said anything about restoration of statehood. General Bajwa had mentioned it.
I have.
Are you keen on restoration of statehood as well?
I just did. When I say that the identity of the Kashmiris, separate from the identity of the country called India, has to be maintained and retained, that's what I'm talking about. You can call it whatever you want to call it. The 370 part, I want to be clear again, because I think you've put it in different terms. Non-issue doesn't mean that I don't care whether Kashmiris get their rights or not. What I'm saying is you can call it an article, not an article 500 or 1000. That's not Pakistan's concern. We have never recognized and cannot, because the UN doesn't recognize the imposition of the Indian constitution on the illegally occupied territory.
I understand.
Whether you call it 370 or 500,
I understand, but the important thing, and I'm repeating this for the sake of an Indian audience, is the steps that you want India to take to create what your Prime Minister has called a conducive atmosphere for dialogue to resume is restoration of statehood, assurance that the demographic status of Kashmir will not be altered. You don't want any terrorism in your own country. I'll come to terrorism later, but Article 370 and reversing the abrogation of Article 370 is not a stepping stone that will lead to talks. It's not a condition. It's not.
I will again repeat. If you go back to 370 and give everything I'm asking for, you can call it 370. I'm okay with that. You want to call it 370A? I'll take that. It's not my concern what the article number is. My concern is Kashmiri people and their right. When you do these things, I'm covered. If you don't do these things and you return 370, it doesn't work.
I think what you said is crystal clear. We've repeated it 3 times. Let's not get caught in the terminology.
I agree.
Whether the things you want require 370 be reversed or not. To me and to an Indian audience listening to you, it is crystal clear that the reversal of 370 is not an issue. What is important is things like democratic rights, protecting the identity of the Kashmiris, and that, I presume, translates into restoring the statehood of Jammu and Kashmir. Now,
in nature and spirit.
In nature and spirit. One last confirmatory question before I move on. I take it this is what Prime Minister Imran Khan meant when he said India has to take the first step. I take it this is what General Bajwa meant when he said that our neighbor will have to create a conducive environment. I take it what you spelled out is what they had in mind.
Yes, pretty much. India is the one that qualitatively changed the situation on the ground by doing something unilateral. India has to create that environment. That's just logical. But let me also say, Karan, there's an important point here. You do realize that what Pakistan is saying is essentially that India must fulfill its responsibility under international law and bilateral agreements with Pakistan.
Not that I want to make this a tutumeme and an acrimonious interview. We have both committed ourselves to having a sensible, objective, and balanced conversation.
But trying hard.
I'll point out to you, and I think as an anchor I should do this, that the Indian position is that in fact whatever happened constitutionally in Kashmir in August 2019 is an internal Indian matter, well within the powers of the Indian government to do. It does not impact in any way either on UN resolutions or for that matter on the Simla Agreement, which India believes is the binding agreement that determines the relationship between India and Pakistan on Kashmir. I'm simply putting clear the Indian point of view because I think it should be clear, since you are repeatedly bringing up the Pakistan one. I don't want to collapse into a tu meme at this point. So with your permission, let me put it like this.
There's one line on that, and that is that a first-year law student can tear that argument apart, but we leave it at that. I agree. No point going back and forth.
Absolutely. This then was the situation that prevailed in March and April, and what I call the high point of the moment of hope and expectation. Now, as viewed from India, things began to slowly unravel towards the end of April when Pakistan's Economic Coordination Council first recommended that sugar and cotton should be imported from India, a decision that was rejected by the cabinet the very next day. Let me ask, what went wrong? Was it a step too far or was it a step too fast?
First of all, I don't agree with you at all that things started unraveling when this issue of import from India came up. I don't know whether things have unraveled. Frankly, I hope they haven't. This question of whether there was a moment or not, perhaps the moment was never there if India wasn't sincere in its approach. If the only goal was to tell the world, oh, we're going to talk, everything would be fine, forget about the oppression and human rights violations in Kashmir and just focus on other things with India, then maybe the moment was never there. Because, Karan, I want to tell you that if anybody in India or elsewhere thought that Pakistan's conciliatory narrative on moving forward was signaling that Pakistan would just forget Kashmir and move on, those people are living in fool's paradise. No Pakistani government, no Pakistani political party has ever come close to that. It's a national consensus.
Can I just, for the record, say, I don't think anyone...
Let me finish.
Can I just make one point? I don't think anyone in India ever believed that Pakistan would say, forget Kashmir and move forward.
Good, I'm glad.
Wrong characterization of the Indian position, no matter who you attribute that position to. We all know it's an issue that has to be sorted out, which is why there was such interest, I'll put it as mildly as that, in General Bajwa's comments, which you confirm, because people saw it as a window of opportunity that was opening. People then felt, when the cabinet reversed the Economic Coordination Council's decision to import sugar and to import cotton from India, that things were unraveling. And people wondered, was this a step too fast or a step too far?
I'll come to that. If you are confirming that statements from Indian officials saying this is now a unilateral matter can be disregarded, I'm very glad to hear that. Good. Okay. Now,
no, that's not what I said, but never mind.
Well, because you're saying that everybody wants to solve it, then I think it means that you want to engage Pakistan, which is great. And as I said, credit should be given where it's due. And if there was an approach made, it was a good thing. It needs to be carried through because Pakistan still remains interested in moving forward. Now, in terms of the moment, perhaps it's still there if India is willing to do right by Kashmiris. We are simply saying we need to see action on the ground. And I'll tell you why, but I'll wait for that. Let me come to your trade question. I hope the Indian system has at least faint memories of how democratic processes should work. What happened? The Pakistani Prime Minister, who is only first among equals in his cabinet, who's not a dictator, got a summary saying, we can get these 2 or 3 commodities from India at a cheaper price. He allowed that file to move forward to his cabinet's committee that decides issues purely on commercial and trade grounds. That committee looked at this and said, yes, on simply commercial grounds, this is a cheaper proposition, but it's an issue of trade with India. This must now go, as is the rule, always, to the full cabinet of the federal government of Pakistan. It went to the cabinet. There was a very vibrant debate. And at the end of that debate, the voices that prevailed were the ones who were asking a simple question. Is there anything that tells us that the Indian government is sincere in moving forward with Pakistan, or is it using this approach as a deflection, as a diversion, as a ruse to continue oppressing Kashmiris, continue illegally occupying, and just telling the world things are fine? Let me finish, Karan.
Don't
Let me finish.
into your rhetoric.
Sorry, let me finish. It's not rhetoric. If you don't like something, it doesn't qualify as rhetoric. I'm giving you facts on what happened. Now, these people asked this question. And yes, I want to tell you very clearly that if it's a choice between saving a few dollars and Kashmiri lives, Pakistan is ready to sacrifice the material. And that was the decision.
Let me just point out one thing, Dr. Yusuf, that it wasn't India that was asking Pakistan, buy our sugar, buy our cotton. This was
not at all.
Coming from Pakistan.
Not at all.
You weren't doing India a favor in buying India.
Not at all.
Sugar. You were actually buying it at a cheaper price. And
oh, yeah. I'm not saying there's any favor. All I'm telling you is what happened.
But
it was an internal democratic debate in Pakistan, and the result is very clear. And I've told you why that result came.
The only reason people were a bit surprised in India is that when the Economic Committee made this recommendation, I believe the Commerce Minister is your Prime Minister. So when he forwarded a recommendation from his own ministry to his cabinet, it's a bit strange that his own recommendation being forwarded to his own cabinet should be then turned down to his own cabinet. Let me finish. And the impression in India was that your Interior Minister, Sheikh Rashid, and your Foreign Minister, Qureshi, were the ones who forced the Prime Minister to back off, which is why people felt things were beginning to unravel.
Very disappointed to hear this from Karan Thapar. I could have expected this from somebody else. I repeat, the Prime Minister of Pakistan is the first among equals in his cabinet. Yes, he passed on that summary in line with a classic democratic principle. Okay. I, one person, thinks this could happen. I want the view of my entire cabinet. And nobody forced the Prime Minister. We have a culture of debate in our cabinet, as democratic systems do. And let me also tell you very clearly on record, I was also of the view, having been involved in this conversation of India, given my portfolio, I do not see signs of sincerity from India. So it's not the India Minister of that. I am somebody, Karan, who has advocated India-Pakistan peace in my writings for years. And even I don't have legs to stand on. In terms of sincerity,
on something, let me pick up, Dr. Yusuf, on something you said in that very long conversation we've had about the selling of sugar and cotton. You began by saying, I don't know whether things have unraveled. Later on, you also said, perhaps that moment is still there if India is prepared to do fair by Kashmiris. I wrote your words down. Those are what you said are two different.
I stand by them.
And you stand by it. In that context, then, that the moment of hope and expectation of February may still be there, in that belief that perhaps there is still a moment to go forward if India stands by, let me raise what you said very recently on the 4th of July about the bomb that happened outside Hafiz Saeed's house in Lahore. You said RAW carried it out. Virtually at the same time, a day before or a day after, the Indian authorities accused Pakistan of flying drones over the High Commission in Islamabad. The Indian side claimed that the explosives dropped on an Air Force base in Jammu were dropped by drones that came from Pakistan. Once again, this led to the impression that the moment of hope in February had transformed into mutual accusations of terror by July. Now, when you say that that moment may still be there, and your words were perhaps it's still there if India does fair to Kashmiris, are you saying that the issues of terror raised by both sides are not stumbling blocks? We can still carry on with that moment of hope. That's the impression you've given. I'm asking you to clarify.
I don't know where you got that impression. I also said, before I said perhaps the moment is there, that's my hope and wish, that perhaps that moment was never there if India was not sincere in its approach to begin with. I don't know the answer. Only India, the Indian government can answer. Now, Let me explain, because you put a lot on the table. I've said categorically that there is a basket of things that have to happen on Kashmir, and India has to cease perpetrating terrorism against Pakistan for us to know that India is sincere. Now, Johor Town, and then your copters and the comment. I think you've answered the question. And by the way, I don't think it was the same day. It was 2 or 3 days later that India talked about these copters. But let me just explain Johor Town. The fact of the matter, Karan, is these are not allegations. More will come in the days to come. And it coincidentally happens that in the last interview I did with you, I had revealed some information and we put out a whole dossier after that. Look, we have concrete evidence in intelligence. There are financial records. There are telephone records. We have arrested the main perpetrators. The person identified as the main mastermind and the handler has a clear link to Indian origin individuals and Indian nationals who are residing in India. The main mastermind who would actually task the terrorist attack is based in India. We have details of his real identity, of his fake and cover names, telephone conversations, Indian numbers, the recruiter in a third country outside India had transferred money. We have those transactions. By the way, with the help of third countries who completely know and agree with us on what has happened. And then a new phenomena, thousands of cyber attacks on our information gathering networks right after this terrorist attack to slow down the process of us collecting information and getting to the bottom of it.
Can I stop you there for a moment? I'm not
all of it is in front of us.
Can I stop you for 1 moment?
There are people, there are testimonies. No, Karan, please give me a second. No, sorry.
No, I'm not
Karan,
interrupting you.
anything you
for a little clarification for the audience, then you continue.
We will get to that, Karan. I'm sorry. We will get to that. But anytime I say something which is factual, may not be comfortable, I cannot be stopped.
I'm
Listen.
not stopping you from saying it. I'm asking you to give me the name of the mastermind. You say you have it. You say you have his phone number. Give it to me. On television, let the Indian people hear the evidence you have. That's all I'm saying. Give me the name of the mastermind. Give me the financial details. Give me the telephone records. Give me the phone numbers. You said you have them.
I thought you were a TV anchor. Everybody will hear this on TV in detail when the time is right. I promised you last time and we did it, and I promise you now and we will do it. To finish what I was saying, Karan, please understand, this is not point scoring. This is not India, Pakistan, tutu meme. These are real human beings who have done nothing wrong to be killed. I also want to tell you, Karan, please wait.
Terror attacks that Pakistan has
I'm sorry.
India. Don't forget 2008 when over 160 people died. It was done from your country. Tariq Khoza, the head of your NIA, has a...
This is not fair, Karan.
I'm just pointing it out because we mustn't get into tutu memes. It doesn't serve any purpose. We can go on and on in circles.
Karan, please allow me to finish. It's only civil. If you don't want a tutu meme, at least let your guest finish. You've invited me here. I'm spending time with you. Please let me finish what I'm saying. This is not an isolated incident. That's what bothers us. When we talk about the moment and sincerity and moving forward, the reason I'm raising this is not that I'm trying to tell you somebody is good or bad. You've asked a question about moving forward. This is the reality I see on my desk every single day. I will also tell you in our dossier, we've put out details, we've put out pictures, we've put out videos. And let me also tell you that there is a clear direction of trying to undermine the Pakistan-China relationship. And CPEC,
Dr. Yusuf,
fingerprints are clear.
We can't.
How can you expect me?
We can't make a single answer to a single question a moment to hijack the interview. Simply
how can you expect
and become acrimonious? Let me pause and put
my friend.
I think you raised a requirement as an anchor for me to make a certain point that is important. It is this. You
raised your down, my friend. I didn't raise it. Now, at least let me tell you what's happened.
I raised it. Dr. Yusuf, You allege that Raw was involved in the blast outside Hafiz Saeed's house. You claim you have the identity of the mastermind, the identity of the handler, you have financial and telephone records, you have the phone numbers, but you're not revealing it. You say you reveal it at an appropriate time. That's your prerogative. I'll finish and you answer. Let me also add that the Indians believe that, in fact, they have good evidence that links the drone explosive blast that happened over a Jammu Air Force camp to Pakistan. First, the pressure fuses are identical to ones used by the Pakistan Army. Secondly, the longitude and latitude device that was used to drop the bombs is also something that is frequently used by the Pakistan Army. Obviously, if we carry on like this, we will be doing nothing further than tutu meme. The reason I brought up your accusations of Indian involvement in the Lahore bomb is because you had earlier said that moment of hope may continue. And I wanted to clarify, does it continue despite the allegations of terror that you made? Because the truth is, in early July, and your own paper, Express Tribune, picked this up, you were giving an interview to a local TV channel. You said that, in fact, there were no longer backdoor contacts. Your words were, it's over. And the suggestion was that that moment of hope is over. We're back to the traditional impasse of before February. Now you've said that moment of hope may continue despite the terror, and there's confusion. That's all I'm trying to clarify. Does the moment of hope continue? Has terror blasted it to smithereens? Which of it?
If you infer what you want from news reports, you'll reach contradictory conclusions. Look, we need to be mature and serious about this. What I am putting on the table is a major stumbling block, a deal breaker. And that is evidence of what we see happening in our country. I wish and hope that the Indian government realizes the benefit of joining initiatives like CPEC rather than actively undermining it. But till that is happening, yes, it is a stumbling block. You keep going back to the moment. So if you allow me, if you promise to allow me 2 minutes, I will tell you the dilemma in the Pakistani mind. Can I?
Go ahead.
Okay. Karan, there's a deeper problem here. Pakistan has bent over backwards to signal, to the point that you're saying there was a lot of interest in India on the comments. So clearly we want to move forward. Is that weakness? No. That's our strength because we are confident in where we stand. Now, after that, I've told you there was a litmus test for India. India had to create the enabling environment. We haven't seen it on the ground. And we see terrorism continue. Now, leave all of this aside. There is a deeper question, Karan, that we must answer. If we want to see India-Pakistan move forward, Pakistani minds are asking a question of me, of everybody else. Frankly, many in the world are, and millions of Indians are.
What is the question? What is the question?
What is the question? The question, Karan, is whether the current Indian government is operating as a modern nation state's government would, abiding by international laws and norms, or frankly, are we looking at a purely ideologically motivated Hindutva mindset, which is expansionist and which pride, Karan, which takes Karan.
If you're going to use the interview behind the disguise of
Karan,
confrontational chat to make allegations and raise these sort of issues, then you're inviting me, if not provoking me, to have to respond similarly. And we will collapse back into the tutu meme that you and I thought we were keen to avoid. I don't think it serves any purpose if, in trying to explain how a moment of hope in February collapsed into accusations of terror mutually exchanged between the two countries by July, if these other issues keep coming up, because all you're doing is muddying the water. You see, you raise questions about India not behaving in a civilized manner. Your own paper, Nawaz Waqt, on the 17th of July, that's your paper, reported that last week in Tashkent, your Prime Minister and your Foreign Minister shook hands with every single Foreign Minister but the Indian Foreign Minister. That comes across as gratuitous, ungracious rudeness.
Karan, if I'm going to answer questions. They're going to be on merit. If you feel you need to respond, please do, but allow me to make my point. Otherwise, you should have done this interview with yourself, my friend. This happened last time. This is happening again. Please allow me to complete. Otherwise, we can call it a day. Now, I want to
make
continue.
great progress for the first 30 minutes because you were not being polemical, you were not making ideological points, and therefore there was no need for me as an anchor to respond. Now you've become polemical, you're making ideological points, and therefore you're changing the nature of the interview. Let me end this by simply saying this. You've had a chance to put to an Indian audience and to a Pakistani audience, because they'll be watching this, all the details you believe you have of Indian involvement in what happened in Lahore, but you won't make them public, you won't share them, you'll say that will only happen at the appropriate time. Let me end this section of the interview by making one simple point. Does it then mean that the window of opportunity that we thought was opening in February has shut? Because your words, as quoted by Express Tribune on the 4th of July, are, "It's over now." Are we therefore back to the traditional impasse of not talking to each other? Is that where we are? That moment of hope is now over and finished?
It's difficult for me if you're not willing to listen to my answer. You need to make a decision whether you're going to let me answer this very question. But it's not going to be
asking the question. Go ahead and answer it, but answer the question rather than sidetrack into other issues.
Let me answer, and then you can decide how you want to respond. But if you don't let me answer, we can't go forward.
Go ahead. Please answer.
Okay. Very direct answer to your question, whether it's over or not, yet again, is we have a deeper dilemma that we need an answer to know that. And that deeper dilemma I am putting in front of you, so give me a couple of minutes. The deeper dilemma is whether we are dealing with a normal modern nation state or an ideologically motivated government that is taking pride in exhibiting rogue behavior. Now, let me qualify. This is not polemics. Let me qualify what I'm saying. Number one, we are talking of a government that, contrary to what you said earlier, publicly boasted about solving Kashmir unilaterally in contravention of all international law. Park that aside. Karan, let me finish. Very recently, your external affairs minister, very recently, has publicly said that it is India that ensured that Pakistan remains in the grey list of FATF, essentially indicting the entire FATF membership, saying that India has pressured them to make a technical forum political, and he's boasting about it. Let me also tell you, very frankly, this issue of terrorism is not an allegation, but we leave that aside. I will also tell you the EU Disinfo Lab is a very worrying report. If you read it, it is saying that the Indian state spent millions of dollars in 116 countries to create a fake disinformation campaign against Pakistan. And the final point, the Pegasus, India's Watergate, Karan, who knows this better than you? Your group has been covering this, and I salute you for that. Pakistani numbers, you think that shouldn't concern us? So all I'm telling you is we are worried that this is a country, this is a government. Let me just say this: it is a government that, for good reason, an individual called Karan Thapar is saying, if you want a real world mimic to a tyrant, look at the Indian Prime Minister. Abhay Shukla on your program compared Narendra Modi to Hitler.
I applaud you for watching my program.
We are worried.
Seriously, I applaud
as
you
a neighbor,
for bringing them up as a riposte to my government. Let me add.
As a neighbor,
now I think it's only fair you let me add.
As a neighbor, we are very worried
about the false nature of democracy in your country and question whether a real democracy, the biggest in the world, should be talking to you and in fact treating you as a democracy. We're concerned about your treatment of Hindus. We're concerned about your treatment of Christians. We're concerned, in fact, about the manner in which minorities in your country suffer. There is an awful lot that people in India can bring up in exactly the same way that you
Please.
have concerns about our country. So I don't think it's fair that we should indulge in a conversation
Karan.
that all we do is trade charges. But it can be
Oh,
done
boy.
pretty effectively from both sides. Yours is a very false democracy. Your claim to being a democracy is unhinged by the fact that no minority person can become prime minister or president in your country. Hindus can't, Christians can't. You have a blasphemy law that targets innocent women who then have to seek refuge. Your own governors have been assassinated by their security guards because they were showing sympathy to Christian women being mistreated. So let's not bring up these charges. It serves no purpose, Dr. Yusuf.
Karan, my friend,
No purpose.
my friend, I'm sorry you're struggling. Let me just say what you are saying and what I'm saying. I'm not telling you what's happening within your country. Good luck to you. What have I said? I have said Kashmir matters to me. It's an internationally recognized dispute. Pegasus, I don't care what you do to your ministers. You have the Pakistani Prime Minister on tap, my friend. It's none other than the Pakistani Prime Minister.
Are you confirming it?
I haven't.
Are you confirming that his phone was tapped? Because that's not confirmed, is it? I'd be very grateful.
That's what I've.
You're saying.
That's what I've read, my friend.
Are you confirming it? Are you
What am I confirming?
that his phone was hacked? Because your comment seems to suggest his phone was successfully hacked.
The gentleman who's responsible for it lives very close to where you are. Go and ask.
Okay.
Well, I mean, you're asking me, it's my Prime Minister's phone. He doesn't know whether it's hacked or not. It's for India to tell us whether they did it or not. And frankly, the number of names on it tells me that Indian government is very much in on illegally spying on foreign nationals.
We actually don't know for sure whether the Prime Minister's phone was hacked or simply one of a number of phones that were potential targets. Secondly,
it's bad enough.
So if the hacking happened, that it was done by an Indian agency. Remember, the French believed that their president, their former prime minister, and 14 of their cabinet ministers were hacked by Moroccan agencies. So it could be done in Pakistan's case by any other country as well. But can I make a suggestion? We've gone through India-Pakistan exhaustively. The audience is obviously convinced that we haven't lived up to our commitment to avoid acrimony and to avoid tutu meme. Let me, with your permission, move to another issue as the last one before I end the interview. With
one line from me, and then you can move on. Every single point I've raised to you is one that directly affects Pakistan, is a legitimate worry for us. If enlightened Indians are saying there is a particular prototype of a government in India, it is going to worry us. We're a neighbor. And if you ask me whether we can move forward or not, that is my principal question.
All right, Dr. Yusuf.
What you raised is an internal Pakistani matter, and we'll do better.
You wanted to speak a line. You've spoken several.
Thank you for letting me.
A pleasure, Dr. Yusuf, and I'm glad the tone is becoming civilized and normal.
It was always civil. Let's move on, my friend. Let's move on.
I want to talk to you about the developing situation in Afghanistan, which is an issue of major concern to both countries. Let me start by asking, would Pakistan welcome a Taliban government in Afghanistan?
No.
That's very clear.
Pakistan will welcome whatever Afghans decide for their future. Nothing else. We have no favorites, no line on who should go where. Only the Afghans. If anybody tries to impose from the outside, it will not work.
Let me quote to you what Prime Minister Imran Khan said to the New York Times in an interview on the 25th of June. Asked if Pakistan would recognize the Taliban if they carry out a full military takeover in Afghanistan, he said, and I'm quoting him, Pakistan has been emphasizing to the Taliban that they should not go for a military victory. Pakistan will only recognize a government which is chosen by the people of Afghanistan, whichever government they choose. Does that mean that if the Taliban grab power militarily, Pakistan will not recognize their government?
Pakistan's position, Karan, is that at all costs, we should keep trying to facilitate a political settlement in Afghanistan. You've got to understand Pakistan's predicament. Given Pakistan's border with Afghanistan, the links we have, it is not one step removed or five steps removed, like let's say India or any other country. The problem we have is not who's going to do what and how the government is formed. Our problem is if there is protracted conflict, there is great possibility of spillover. So our very clear interest for Afghanistan's sake and Pakistan's sake is that there has to be a political negotiation and only Afghans should sit and agree on what they want in terms of their government and future.
So I repeat my question. If the Taliban were to militarily grab power in Afghanistan, will Pakistan recognize that Taliban government? Yes or no?
First, let me ask you, is that a possibility? Is that India's view right now? Is that what's happening?
A possibility that India believes could happen. So the American intelligence agencies have said that in 6 months' time, the existing government will fall and the Taliban will take over. And General Milley, the chairman of the American Joint Chiefs of Staff, said 24 hours ago that one of the real credible possibilities is a Taliban takeover. So I come back to my question. If the Taliban militarily grab power, will Pakistan recognize that Taliban government? Yes or no?
I'm struggling to understand why we take statements. It's the very same people who said for 20 years Afghanistan is a new country, modern state. I'm saying I don't even know if it's a possibility.
You're quarreling with what American intelligence agencies have said that it could take 6 months. Quarrel with them. I'm only quoting them. My question is, if the Taliban militarily grab power, will you recognize such a Taliban government?
Yes, we'll do what the rest of the world does. Let's wait and see how the international community reacts. We don't have the luxury to think about it. We right now are obsessively focused on trying to help get a political settlement in Afghanistan. This is as important as it gets for Pakistan. So for us, what happens tomorrow or day after 6 months, we're talking of today. Whoever can help get us there and get Afghans there, most importantly, we're willing to work with. Unfortunately, those who spoiled this need to stay away.
I'm going to underline how you began that answer. When I asked you, will Pakistan recognize the Taliban government that comes to power through a military takeover? Your answer was, yes, we'll do what the rest of the world does. In other words, if the rest of the world recognizes that government, so will you.
I did not say yes. First of all, I didn't say when they take over. I'm not even sure that's a possibility. But second, I said we will see how the international community reacts and then make a decision.
In other words, if the international community recognizes a government where the Taliban have come to power militarily, then you too will consider recognizing the government. You will wait to see what the international community does. That's what you said. You said it 2 times.
If tomorrow you have a UN resolution saying that the Taliban are a legitimate government, Pakistan will be bound by international law. I don't know what will happen. We'll wait and see. For now, focus on how to end the conflict.
Let me put to you what looks like a contradiction in your Prime Minister's position. In that interview to the New York Times, he said that you are emphasizing to the Taliban repeatedly that they should not go for a full military takeover. That was Imran Khan on the 25th of June to the New York Times. It's quite clear that the Taliban are not heeding your advice.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the Vice President of Afghanistan, Amarullah Saleh, has publicly accused Pakistan's Air Force of actually helping the Taliban in Spin Bolda. And in Tashkent, while sitting beside Imran Khan, President Ghani accused Pakistan of allowing 10,000 jihadis to enter the country. So on the one hand, Imran Khan claims he's advising the Taliban not to go for a military takeover, and he's being ignored by people the world considers his puppets, but he's being ignored by them. And on the other hand, the Afghan government is publicly saying, we don't trust you. And Ghani said this to Prime Minister Khan's face, sitting beside him in Tashkent. You're caught between the two. One lot don't agree with you and won't listen to you. The other lot saying, you're betraying us and you're cheating.
I think that's fair. We are caught between 2 lies. Now, let me explain why. First of all, nobody in the world is saying Taliban are Pakistan's puppets except India. The Americans have been very clear. They understand that Pakistan has very limited leverage. And what leverage would an outsider have when a group thinks that they've won militarily and are going to keep going, if that's their view? Taliban have never heeded to Pakistani advice. Even in the 90s, frankly, Pakistan bent over backwards to try and convince them not to blow up the Bamiyan Mughals. And very many more examples. So, no, we have very limited leverage, and whatever we did, frankly, is gone after the American withdrawal because the Taliban feel probably that they've won on the ground. As far as the Amrullah Salehs and unfortunately my Afghan counterpart, to some extent President Ghani. First of all, I was in the meeting between the two, the Prime Minister of Pakistan and the President of Afghanistan. I didn't hear those words. Maybe you were there somewhere and you listened to them. The point about the public statement.
Can I just add, he repeated them in interviews to Indian newspapers, he repeated them in interviews on television, so I'm surprised you didn't hear it. Everyone else did. And Imran Khan actually riposted by saying, you're being unfair, President Ghani. So your Prime Minister heard it. You may have turned a Nelsonian deaf ear. But
I think we're talking of...
was all ears.
We're talking of two different things. You're talking of the speeches made in the conference. I was talking of the meeting they held. You said meeting, that's why I referred to that. Yes, in the speech, President Ghani said what he said, and he got the exact response he should have from my Prime Minister. Now, these public statements, there's a somber moment here, Karan, and I think we need to be serious about it. The Afghan government feels besieged. And really, these statements, frankly, are cries for help, and Pakistan is willing to help. Despite everything that's coming from there, we are seeing a country where the international forces for 20 years invested trillions of dollars, and it's coming to naught, unfortunately. So yes, this is desperation, this is frustration. We are going to ignore all of that. We are not going to look at that. What we are looking at is how do we help the Afghan government, other Afghan political factions, the Taliban, to try and come together and solve their problem. No other country, and in selfish interest, frankly, has done more than Pakistan. I want to tell you, 15,000 man-hours in the last 6 months, 15,000 man-hours of our leadership have gone into talking to various Afghan groups to try and make them sit together.
Absolutely commendable, and I applaud you personally for that effort that you've made. Unfortunately, it hasn't led to a useful result.
That's true. That's correct. It's very unfortunate.
And the problem is, your Prime Minister ended up saying to the New York Times, if the Taliban tried to take over Afghanistan through the military, we will seal the border. My question is simple. Will General Bajwa allow you to do so? The Pakistan army believes that Afghanistan provides strategic depth. If the Taliban have taken over and you have a friendly government in Kabul, one of a group that was nurtured in the days when Benazir Bhutto was your Prime Minister, for which he took credit publicly, will you then seal the border and deny yourself that strategic depth? Won't General Bajwa turn around and say, come on, Prime Minister, just as we've secured the strategic depth we want, we can't seal the border? Or is Imran Khan simply saying this to please the Western press? He doesn't mean it, but he thinks this is the sort of thing he should say.
Whatever the Prime Minister of Pakistan says will happen. Full stop.
Well, let's wait and see. You're saying to me that the army chief will accept the Prime Minister's decision even if he disagrees with it? It's never happened in your history before. You know that when army chiefs are thwarted by civilian prime ministers, the civilian prime minister is, forgive my colloquial language, turfed out of office. You've had prime ministers who've been executed by army chiefs.
I can give a facetious answer or a serious one. Let me try the serious one. And the serious one, Karan, is India must introspect and update this narrative for the sake of this relationship. And let me say this categorically. If India is unable to see the opportunity for this region to move forward with the current Pakistani civil and military leadership, I'm afraid you're missing a once-in-a-lifetime chance to understand that India and Pakistan...
That is an answer to the question I raised, but I won't quarrel with you over it. You have a right to...
There's only one leader in this country, I told you.
I think I touched a sore nerve when I said that in Pakistan there is a tradition of civilian prime ministers being overthrown by army chiefs. It's happened repeatedly.
It has.
There could be a danger if Imran Khan says we'll seal the border and General Bajwa says no, we won't. We want that strategic defense to work for us. But
I think, let me just say, yes, there's been a history. Countries learn from mistakes, countries improve. Other countries stick with their mistakes, go from bad to worse. And I'm afraid one country in the region, the world is beginning to see is going in that direction. The sooner that stops, the better for Pakistan and India relations.
Let's come back to Afghanistan. Will Pakistan and the influence that you have over the Taliban act to ensure that an Afghanistan controlled by Taliban does not become a sanctuary for LET and Jaish, but also for Al-Qaeda and ISIS? Or is it already too late? Because there are credible reports that LET and Jaish are already fighting alongside the Taliban in the offensives against the Afghan army.
You almost seem obsessed or, dare I say, excited about the prospect of the Taliban coming into power. It's a fairly, odd position for an Indian to take, mind you. Pakistan, I will again repeat, is not thinking of this. Pakistan wants...
My question. My question was, will Pakistan act to ensure that under the Taliban, Afghanistan does not become a sanctuary for LET, Jaish, Al-Qaeda and ISIS? What is the answer to that question?
I'd only spoken 4 words and you said I have an answer. So if you allow me 4 more, maybe I'll get there. Am I allowed?
As long as you answer the question, you can take as long as you want, but actually you weren't answering the question.
Allow me and I will answer it.
Go ahead. I allow you.
Thank you very much. You're very gracious. Okay. You've got to understand where Pakistan sits and where everybody else sits. For Pakistan, this is an existential problem. It's not just about asking a question, what will happen, how exciting, somebody will come, there'll be conflict. What am I telling you? I'm giving you a very serious comment on this. Right now, the conversation cannot go to what will happen when Afghanistan implodes. At all costs, the international community, including Pakistan, have a responsibility to try and do whatever we can to save Afghan lives. These are not commodities. This country for 40 years has suffered. Yes, the narrative is, oh, look, Pakistan, whatever. Karan, let's be serious. We are
really an answer to my question.
Yes,
it is allowing Afghanistan to be a sanctuary for terrorists. Is that
Afghanistan should never become a sanctuary for terrorists. We don't want to go there. We want Afghanistan to be peaceful. And mind you, Afghanistan has been forced to become a sanctuary for terrorists in the past 20 years by none other than India trying to fuel terrorism in Pakistan. That must stop. And nobody else.
I have to point out for the sake of the audience that this is not incorrect. It is actually laughable. There is no Indian involvement converting Afghanistan into a sanctuary for terrorists. You know that. I don't know why you're saying it.
No, I know the opposite. Have you read the Pakistani dossier? Have you read the Pakistani dossier?
Can I take a phrase from Salman Bashir, your former...
Have you read the Pakistani dossier against India?
Of literature, as Salman Bashir said, of an Indian dossier. I'm sure the Indians would use that phrase back to you. Salman Bashir's phrase fits perfectly what many Indians would feel about your dossier. It is a piece of literature. And by the way, I imagine, although I haven't read it, that the language...
you haven't read it, that's the problem.
The qualities of Shakespeare's either. But leave
I think you haven't read it, that's the problem. Read it, then we'll have this conversation. And Salman, please don't misquote him. He said...
I'm not misquoting him. I'm quoting him accurately. A piece of literature is what he called the Indian dossier. And I'm saying the Indians will call yours a piece of literature, except it's not...
read it, we'll have a conversation. Once you've read it, please give it a little bit of time, read it, and we'll have a conversation.
Please send it to me. I look forward to receiving it. I'm sure you can find a way of delivering it. It's
in Delhi, I'm sure. Many places. But anyway, we'll get it to you.
My last question, because I think we've gone on for a very long time. In a recent interview to Tolo TV in Afghanistan, your foreign minister said that India's role in Afghanistan is, and I'm quoting him, larger than it ought to be. Would Pakistan urge a Taliban government in Afghanistan to reduce or eliminate India's presence in the country, diplomatically, economically?
Pakistan's view on Indian presence and what he said is absolutely correct, larger than comfortable. What does that mean? You have economic presence, socio-economic presence, development projects. Great. Anybody who can help Afghanistan. You have people who fuel terrorism in Pakistan under the garb of development workers. Not possible for Pakistan to accept. And if, quote unquote, credible reports, as you say, credible reports are to be believed of planes flying out of background, I'm not sure those were development workers leaving Afghanistan and going to India. I don't know. The point Pakistan makes is, you want to help Afghanistan sincerely, please do. Everybody should. If you are there for other purposes, then I'm afraid Pakistan can't accept that. No self-respecting country can accept what India has been doing from Afghanistan.
All right. I think that's a clear answer. Let's end this interview at a moment when neither of us is quarreling, neither of us is being sarcastic to the other, neither of us is leveling charges at the other. My impression is that for the first 30 minutes, we did make sufficient good progress. Unfortunately, we then lapsed back into the acrimony and tutu meme that both of us thought we could avoid. But perhaps that's inherent in India-Pakistan conversations. Both of us have, unfortunately, audiences at home that we have to play to just as much as we talk to each other.
Karan, allow me to thank you. Allow me to thank you at the end for taking the time. But also let me say, I think it's unfair. It's unfair if we think, at least on my part, that we are playing to the gallery or anything. Let me make a very honest comment. We are talking of 1.5 billion people, overwhelming majority of whom live in abject poverty. That's the reality. We can't hide from that. We also know that regions rise, it's not countries. I think it is the responsibility of both governments, India and Pakistan, to see how we can create better opportunities for our people, because the world is not going to wait for us. That, as a policymaker, is my real challenge.
Absolutely.
But let me also say, in all earnest, we did give India an opportunity. And I'm sorry to say, we are struggling to understand whether this is now a country you can have any rational conversation with. I want to be proven wrong, and I implore your government to do right by Kashmiris and move forward. But don't see our offer as a weakness. It's a strength for us. We want to move forward. But if it is going to be on the terms that India is putting out for other countries, I'm the hegemon, it's my way or the highway. Fortunately, it's going to be the highway. I thank you once again.
My last question, give me an answer if you can with a yes or no. Is the window still slightly open for an improved relationship, or has it shut?
My very honest view, wish and hope is that it is open. It is India that has to create the enabling environment. The moment it does sincerely, you'll find Pakistan willing. But I'm afraid there are many voices in Pakistan increasingly who are saying that we've got to realize that this Indian government is not going to do it. I hope that's wrong. I don't have any answer for them right now, given the Indian conduct. Unfortunately, we'll see where it goes.
Let's leave it there. I thank you for the time you've given me. I thank you for agreeing to do this interview. I thank you also for whatever you reveal about the background that brought about the ceasefire. That certainly will be news. Take care.
And we're also waiting to welcome you in Pakistan, Karan. I invite you once again. Please do come. We'll welcome you here, take you around.
I would love to come, and I hope when I come, you will also arrange an interview for me with your Prime Minister. I've interviewed Prime Minister Imran Khan many, many times, most recently in 2015, and I would like to interview him again. So would you please ask him on my behalf whether he would agree to an interview?
Tell me when you're coming.
And you'll secure the interview for me?
Inshallah.
All right. God willing. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you very much.